Hello, it's Ellen again with Be So Creative, and I'm in the process of putting binding on a quilt, a small table runner in this case, all completely on the machine. I'm not doing any hand sewing at all. I have been in the process of sewing my binding down here, and now I'm just about at my stopping point, and I'm going to show you how I connect the two ends. I marked a pin to remind me of when to stop sewing. And so there's my place that I want to stop. And I've left myself a nice big opening so that I have room to work to connect my two ends. At this point, I obviously have a lot of extra binding here, but I want to connect my two ends so that they meet beautifully. And I'd like to do it the same way that I did when I connected all my binding pieces originally, at a 45-degree angle. So the first thing I'm going to do is just take off this selvage end. Oh, I was too lazy to cut it off at the beginning, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut a nice smooth end off of that. And now I'm going to lap the long end over the end that I just cut, over the cut end. And the key is, how much lap over do I have? Where do I want to cut this long piece so that it's going to exactly fit? Well, here's a great little trick to do that. The distance that these two overlap is the exact same distance as the width of my binding strip. I cut my binding strip at 2.5 inches. I can just use it as a guide. Right there is where I'm going to cut off the extra length so that they will only lap over by 2.5 inches. So I use that as my little mark. And you can see now that they lap over 2.5 inches. At this point, I'm going to open up both pieces so that they are both facing up. When I originally joined my binding pieces together, I told you about how I like to think of the bed of my sewing machine as a map of the United States, and that I like my first strip of binding to be laying west to east. So I'm going to go ahead and put that binding strip west to east, again still keeping it straight up. And now this binding strip is going to go north to south, but I do want to keep right sides together when I sew them. So I'm just going to pick it up and turn it right over. When we joined our binding strips together, I told you that you are going to sew from these two cities, Seattle down to Miami. So we're going to do the very same thing here. I'm going to use a pin just to show you what my seam line is going to look like. And it also helps me because I can use it to mark my corner down here. I can use those pins to hold this together while I sew. There's another great reason to put those pins in. You can just sort of open this up and see if it's going to work. And it is. And look, the distance is perfect. I can also tell right away if I twisted one of these. I would know immediately. And so I like to do that pinning process not only to help me hold them together, but just to test and make sure that I didn't twist anything. Now I just have to turn this a little bit, line it up. I'm going to go corner to corner. There's my little corner under there. And if you want, of course, you could put a ruler on here and draw from corner to corner if you'd like. It came out perfectly. All that's left to do now is just trim my seam allowances 1/4 of an inch away. I can go ahead and use my fingers to press these seam allowances open, fold it, put it back underneath my walking foot or dual feet foot, and continue my sewing. Until my opening is completely closed up. You'll never be able to tell where you stopped and started sewing on your binding.